Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. I hope you're all staying safe and staying sane, staying isolated, but hopefully this gives you some human interaction that we all crave right now, even if it's just over the interweb. It's going to be a fun one. I am here with my dear friend, Becc Holland. Becc, what's going on?
Oh, just living that quarantine life.
Right? And I'm actually going, I think I'm 10 times weirder than I actually thought I was.
Oh, for sure. Like, if anyone on the line needs a quick lesson on how to jump rope for 45 minutes in a 71 square foot loft, call me with a low ceiling. I'm like, things have been getting weird here in quarantine. I live alone, so I'm getting all like Tom Hanks Castaway and like naming my kitchen appliances at this point, I feel like.
I love it. I've just turned into like a workaholic because I feel like there's nothing else to do. So I just like, all right, let's do some more shit. Started like 8 other podcasts and like 3 new side things that will never go anywhere, but they're keeping me busy.
It's like, what do the weekends look like? It's like my dad's like, oh, well, you need to take time off. I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna watch like 6 seasons of The Bachelor. Like, what am I gonna do on my actual Saturday here?
Yeah. And this is because we also both have the luxury. Someone just chimed in, Graham. I'm at home with 5 people, including 3 young kids and a dog. So we have the luxury of being on the spectrum with no kids. I don't know if it's a luxury. There's pros and cons on both sides, of course.
You do name kitchen appliances, but there's no screaming, Graham. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your coffee maker becomes your new daughter. Okay, all right. Well, as you can see, we're losing it a little bit, but let's get to this content. I know we have a ton of content. Every time we hang out, we seem to talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we'll try and get through as much as we can, and I'm going to try and shut up and let you do your thing. But what we're going to be talking about today is inbound process. So Becc is very well known for personalization at scale. We did the Flip the Script tour together. We traveled all across the country talking a lot about outbound and how to personalize at scale. This is some new thoughts from Becc on inbound process and how to KPI your reps to drive the results you crave. Topic that doesn't get a lot of love, and it's more process heavy. So very excited to dive into it. Becc, before we get into it, for those who live in a cave in, I don't know, insert very remote location.
Yeah, I'm like, don't name a location. There's someone on this webinar from that location.
That's what I did, and then all these things came to my head, and then like,
Iowa.
Yeah, I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one. So in a remote cave somewhere, if you live there, Becc Holland, who are you? What's going on? Why should we listen to you?
Hey everyone, thanks for the intro. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the head of sales dev at Chorus.ai. I'm not sure quite why they should listen to me, but a little bit of my background that might be helpful. I run the sales dev team over here at Chorus, and I've run a couple teams in the past. And, like Scott mentioned, like a lot of the things that we wanted to do on the tour, we recently did a tour where we, trained about 3,500 people across the US. And, a lot of what people want to hear about is outbound. They want to hear about cold calls. They want to hear about scripts. They want to hear top talk tracks. They want to hear, different email templates. But one of the low hanging fruit that I hadn't seen covered very, very much is inbound process and how to really KPI reps in a way that make sense to them, KPI reps in a way that's fair, and how to drive the most conversion from those demo requests, because we have a lot of marketing departments across the US and across the globe that are spending, billions and billions of dollars to get these people to come to their website, to want to know their product, to want to see what it's about. And then there's just, from my perspective, broken piece in the middle of like, how are we actually converting those people into, actual demos? You would think it's pretty easy. But from my experience with all the departments that I've seen, the inbound process, it's like, there's quite a few hiccups and quite a few myths when it comes to the inbound line and when someone requests a demo. So that's kind of the context of today. Is I really wanted to, when I went on the tour and started training on outbound, I mentioned like, okay, I saw 4x results at one company, 3x results at one company, and 6x results over here at Chorus. But one of the first things that I did do that I didn't tell people about is the first thing that I did was not personalizing messaging at scale, was actually rip out the KPI system and put in a KPI system that really drove the reps to desire quality. So from the process end, I wanted to, full disclosure, this is going to be a very, very technical session today. So if you don't like acronyms, there always seems to be people that don't like acronyms. If you don't like acronyms, this is not the session to be a part of, but it's going to be a really, I hope, meaty session. And we're going to dig into all of the process items on the webinar today.
I love it. And I'll do my best to keep you honest with the acronyms and spell out the ones that are maybe not quite as obvious. A few housekeeping items before we dive in. So number one, this will be recorded. We'll send it out within 24 hours. Chorus and Outreach, thank you for sponsoring this one. And we will send that out. Number two, me and Becc literally talk almost every day. So the reason we're doing this is not just so we can hang out and chat. It is for the community, and it really makes it a lot more fun, a lot more engaging for us when we know who we're talking to, when you guys ask thoughtful questions. So you can see a Q&A, you can see a chat. Please introduce yourself, your name, your title, where you're from. We would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions as we go, please fire away. We definitely want to hear from you. Third and final item is, so we get asked all the time after our webinars, how can we continue the conversation? And people have been asking that for us for years. And we've actually been undertaking a really, really big initiative over the last couple of months at Sales Hacker, where we're going to be building in an interactive community layer. So where our community members can actually interact. But this is new for us. And we're looking for some founding members, if you will, of the community. And if you stay with us till the end, I'll have a little bit more details on that. But we'd love to get some of you guys involved. So that's it. I am now passing the reins over to you, Miss Becc Holland.
Yeah, so I'm seeing people that are pinging in their roles, and just to give everyone a little, clarity on that. We have a lot of SDRs and a lot of inbound SDRs, sales managers, and account development teams on the line today. So I'm really excited to dive in with you guys. But like Scott said, if there are questions along the way, please, Scott is going to be, looking at the chat. And so, put any questions in there and we'll be sure to get to them. Before I go into the content here, I did want to, I have two questions for everyone. The first question for everyone on the line is, how many of you have bought software, any kind of software, within the last 6 months?
You can just chat yes or no. Yes, lots of saying yes, yes, no.
Yeses.
A lot of yeses.
A lot of yeses. Okay. And the second question I have, thanks everyone for sending in these responses. Keep them coming. The second question that I have for everyone is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how pleased were you with the buying process for that software? Whether, that was how quickly they reached out to you, that was, how the demo was set up, whether that was pricing and negotiation, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy the sales cycle?
Okay, Becc, before you start looking at all of them, what do you think? Predictions?
I would guess an average of 6.
Yeah, I'm going to agree.
Ooh, 4.1.
9, and it was Chorus.ai. Brian.
Oh, Chorus, that's great.
Out here making friends. I love it.
4 or 5.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of 5s. We got 4.1. Very specific.
Yeah. So these answers are great. So these answers are pretty in line with what I was thinking. So the interesting thing is, we talk a lot about how can we sell software as a team, but we talk very, very little, or we talk very a lot about how you can market to these different people, how you can get them interested into your product, how you can get them top of funnel, but we talk very little about what the process is whenever they come in the line, and how can we make that more seamless and more buyer centric, if you will. So the 5 pieces of the agenda today, and we're going to just get going here so that we can make it through all this content. But the first thing that I wanted to unpack is what the goal of an effective inbound line is, and common myths that I see in the industry. So full disclosure, I'm defining inbound here as someone who is requesting a demo. So I'm leaving out, content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, those are a different category for me. I define them as postbound is what I call them, but I'm defining inbound today as a true hand raiser who's coming in and who's requesting a demo, and common myths and trends that I see, when it comes to the demo request line. Number 2, we're going to go into the structure of a demo request process that achieves all of our goals, but leaves out some of those cons and some of those reasons that everyone was listing, the sales process or the inbound process as a 4.1 or a 5. The third piece, we're going to go into what should we do with unqualified leads. So anyone who's running an inbound line, anyone who's running a company, anyone who's manned or womaned a inbound line would notice that there's going to be a certain amount of people that come into the inbound line who request a demo, who want to know about your product, who aren't on paper qualified. Like, maybe they don't have, budget or headcount, or they don't have the technographic setup, but there could be a multitude or a litany of reasons. But what are, what should we do with those unqualified leads? So I'll give you an option for what to do with them. The fourth piece, we're going to go into the responsibilities, the new responsibilities of an inbound rep given this system that I'll unpack for you. And then we'll finish with probably my favorite item of all time, KPI systems for inbound reps, for outbound reps, and for all bound reps along the way.
Let's do it.
Let's just jump in. So first, let's start with the goals and the myths of inbound. The goals of inbound are pretty simple. From what I've seen, book qualified demos and filter out unqualified demos. So it seems pretty simple from a high level. You spend a lot of marketing budget, whether that's on, lead acquisition or brand awareness, et cetera, but it's all in goal of, every good marketing team that I've seen has a goal of how many demos, can I bring in, and how many MQLs can I create along the way when it comes to my content. And then you get, like I mentioned, a bunch of different unqualified leads for a bunch of different reasons. And how can we filter out both of those? So that's the goal of any true, demo request line that I have seen. So let's get into the myths. The top 5 myths are listed on the left-hand side. So let's jump in here. The first one that myth that I commonly see that's given to an inbound team is that you should round robin these leads. And the reasoning is over on the right. They'll say like, hey, well, inbound leads, because they're hand raisers and because they have higher buyer intent and because, they make up a lot of my pipeline, these are the most valuable leads that I have coming in. Outbound, it takes a lot more, dig, a lot more education, a lot more, alacrity when it comes to your sales skills. And so inbound, when they come in, they're the most valuable leads. So I want the highest amount of headcount that I can to be on these inbound leads, because I want to make sure that they get taken care of.
I was guilty of this when I was managing a team. Yeah. I think many of us are.
Yeah. So, and it makes sense. It's like, okay, these are high value leads. And of course, like, programs in the beginning, from what I've seen, they can be anywhere from 80 to 90% inbound. They don't have the headcount to go outbound yet. And so in the beginning for the nascent stages for organizations, inbound is your main pipeline. And so we want to make sure that we take care of that pipeline. I'm not going to go into any solutions yet. I'm just going to be problems girl for the next couple of slides. The second myth that I've seen, most common myth on the inbound line, is that you should ask your prospect BANT questions. So for anyone who hasn't come across BANT, BANT is a simple qualifying technique where you ask for budget, you ask for, do they have the authority? Like, are they the decision maker? Do they have a need? And what is their timeline? So BANT in and of itself, full disclosure here, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad qualification metric in and of itself, but the myth here is that I should ask these questions to someone who is coming in on the inbound line. And the reasoning is they want to make sure that they're qualified before they go to their AEs. So a lot of inbound lines that I've seen, it's like I request a demo of, let's say Chorus, for instance, or, outreach. An inbound SDR jumps on the line and they say, hey, before we get going here, let me ask you a couple of questions. What's your budget look like? Are you
literally?
Yeah. What does your budget look like?
How much money do you have?
Are you the decision maker? What is your use case here is how I've heard people phrase it. And how quickly are you looking to buy? And the reasoning, I'm not going to go into the negative sides of this, but I know we're all cringing on the line at the thought of that, but that's what's happening on a lot of inbound lines. And the reasoning behind it is you want to make sure that they're qualified, before you pass them on to the account executive. The third myth that I've seen, when it comes to inbound lines is that you should reach out more quickly, that's the secret answer. That's the silver bullet to get higher conversion is just reach out more quickly. So you'll see a couple of people, publish different documents that say like, under 5 minutes will triple your conversion, or the more quickly that you reach out, that like, the higher response rate is for your lead.
I think HubSpot came out with, I think it was a HubSpot article 4 years ago that said, if you don't reach out within 5 minutes, chance of getting hold of them goes down by like 70% or something. And that kind of rocked every BD program. It was just speed.
Totally. So everyone said like, okay, we need to get people to reach out, as quickly as possible as we can to these leads because they're coming in and we want to make sure we prove higher conversion. It's like at the end of the day, if someone is requesting a demo and they are qualified, you should have theoretically 100% conversion. This is someone who's saying they want a demo of your product. Keep that in mind. This is someone who has done a exorbitant amount of research. They usually know a bit about your setup, given the studies that we've seen of how people buy software. And so, the inbound process to date, it's pretty flawed and broken if we're seeing around 30 to 35% conversion on the demo request line, because these are people who want to see a demo of your product. But yeah, a lot of different studies. HubSpot, was one of the marquee ones that they said, okay, you just got to reach out more quickly and then you'll see, more conversion. Another myth, the fourth myth, is that you shouldn't send unqualified leads to AEs, that you should just put them somewhere. I don't know, what to do with them, but just put them somewhere because AEs shouldn't talk to them because we want to protect the AEs' calendars. We don't want to waste their time. And we also, another argument that I've heard is that we want to protect the data, the accuracy of the data when it comes to sales cycle. Like, I have a certain amount of closers, and if I put some unqualified leads in there, then it messes with their conversion rates and it messes with the data in the CRM, and it's something that they couldn't have really influenced, and so it makes them look bad. And so I see a lot of people giving 0 to no, like that bracket, love to the unqualified leads of like, you requested a demo, and the rationale here is they say, well, it says demo request, it doesn't say that we'll give them one. I'm like, great, but you just got someone all jazzed up about seeing your product, and they thought they would have gotten one, and then they request this demo and they come across this inbound SDR who asks them a bunch of upfront questions. And then you basically, in a best case scenario, politely tell them that they don't have enough money to buy your product.
Yeah. And that, how big does that bucket grow so fast? If you do it that way, I remember all the organizations I've been a part of, there was this like no man's land. And then marketing every quarter would be like, oh, maybe we should do a campaign into no man's land, and it would do so well always.
Yep.
It's like, well, there's something there. Maybe we should always be interacting with those. But it gets big fast.
Yeah.
Becc, can I sneak in a question from the community, because I think it's a good one?
Yes.
Randy Byron, Randy, thanks for the question. What is the reason, in your eyes, most SDRs are pushing to get a demo equipment often before they've asked any discovery questions at all? Is it simply that this is the first metric they are measured by? Is this a breakdown of KPIs? I would say yes.
Yeah, their wallet's tied to it.
Yeah.
Long and the short of it. So that's actually one of the things that we will solve. Great question. And that's one of the things that we will solve in the inbound KPI system is basically we want to find a way to make people comfortable with disqualifying someone from the sales end and from the SDR end. So we're not going to pay them based on meeting count. But that is one of the reasonings behind, them wanting to push something over the fence, is because their view is like, okay, I get paid per meeting, so I'm just going to throw these things over the fence and hope that an AE approves, and I'm going to build a relationship with the account executive and hope that this person, this guy or this girl will just be tight enough with me to where they will know that I get paid out like this and want to encourage me, so they'll approve and confirm it. But that's one of the roots of the issue on the inbound line, of paying based on meeting count. But that's why they want to send over people that are unqualified. Great question. The fifth myth is that your prospects don't know what you're doing. So a lot of inbound people, reps jump on the line and they'll use language like this. They'll say, hey, Scott, thanks so much for requesting for a demo. Before I get you in the right spot, let me ask you a couple of questions to better gear for your demo. And then they'll ask them qualifying questions. Our prospects, thankfully, are very, very smart. And so they know that you are asking them, in most cases, that you are asking them qualifying questions and that you're not adding any actual value here. This is not some kind of benign, benevolent reason, that they're asking these questions with no agenda. They know that you are you're qualifying them before you even get them to see a demo request of your product. So a couple of things that these lead to. Let's start with round robining. In round robining, if you round robin your leads across your team, the first thing that it causes is they're going to have inconsistent user journey. So, if I am round robining the first one to Scott, the second one to me, the third one to Alex, the fourth one to Terry, the fifth one to John, the sixth one to Brittany, then it's like each one of us typically within an SMB or mid-market firm run a different process in terms of how aggressively they reach out, the language that they use, especially even if you control the first template that they send, their messaging in response to requests to your prospects is going to vary for each person. So the first thing that you're going to cause, and I would say the least damaging thing, is you're going to cause an inconsistent user journey to your prospects who are coming in. So I remember I worked at a coffee shop in college, and it was like we would order, none of the staff was trained on how to make food. So it's like sometimes I would order this turkey sandwich and it would be an amazing turkey sandwich. And sometimes I would order it and it'd be burned on one side. So you're basically causing that different variety, for your prospects whenever they're inbounding. And again, this is the least damaging thing that you're causing with round robining, is an inconsistent user journey.
And sorry, Becc, one more clarifying question. Joshua Smith just asked, just a little confusing. Is saying, should I do a round robin on inbound leads? Because it's important, because they are the most valuable, and you want to put a lot of attention on it? Or saying no?
Yeah, these are all myths that you shouldn't round robin.
Yeah. You
shouldn't round robin. And we'll get into what you should do in a second. But round robining leads can damage a couple of different things. But number one, it gives you an inconsistent user journey. And we'll get into a couple more here right now. The second thing that round robining causes is there's a lack of transparency on who is your best BDR. This is a big one for your BDRs, because you cannot maintain quality when you're round robining. So, maybe a VP of sales from Oracle inbounds at one point, and then, maybe a intern from an SMB company, who isn't qualified is the next lead, and then maybe a manager from a mid-market company. And the rationale here is basically they'll say like, oh, well, in the end, it will all equal out. I have never seen it equal out. And what you'll do in the meantime is it's just a game of luck of like which BDR, is up whenever the VP of sales from Oracle requested a demo. And it makes the BDR who got that lead look like they're really, really advanced because they booked someone who's a VP of sales from Oracle, whereas the next person, they got a manager from an SMB company, so they look like they're not as high quality of a BDR. So, an effective KPI system, it should measure two things: someone's work ethic and someone's skill. And if you're round robining leads and you have muddy transparency on who the best BDR is on the team and you're comping them accordingly.
Yeah. And millennials, you'll read in so many studies, I'm one of the value fairness over everything else.
They do. They value fairness. They value transparency.
Yeah.
They value coaching, but yes, this is
huge. This could break your whole team.
It can. And I have seen it firsthand break a team where they were like, okay, you know, for instance, we had our headquarters was in Germany for one company that I worked for, and they were round robining based on geo. And then, so because the marketing efforts were so heavy in Germany, the German reps looked amazing. And the rationale was, well, they speak German, so they have to speak to these leads in German. So they would book like 5, 6, 7 inbound leads per day. And then the poor APAC team or the poor LATAM team or the poor US team, you know, they were making up this differential on outbound. So actually they were my reps in APAC and my reps in LATAM and US were more highly skilled because they were learning how to outbound, but it looked like on the board that they had less skill because they weren't booking as many demos because they didn't have that marketing fire. So points 2 and 3 are very, very important to your team, whether we know it or not, that transparency of who the best BDR is and unfair distribution of the quality of leads are going to be big ones, especially if you're running a team of millennials. The last one, and I think sales, I'm going to win a lot of fans from the sales departments at this point. Round robining, what it causes when you give an inbound lead to a BDR, it basically makes the BDR look like they're responsible for booking that demo and attributes that credit and that money to the BDR. So, you know, if we have BDRs or SDRs that want to become a closer, they want to become a sales rep, they need to learn how to outbound. It's hard and it's brutal and it can be really, really taxing. But if you want to be a sales rep, that's what sales is all about. So, you know, one of the biggest things that I was aiming to do whenever I reorged my system, you know, to, you know, accommodate for this of, I wanted to put out some internal fires of like, hey, I want to make everything fair. I want to make my buyer have a great user journey throughout this mix. I want them to have no time at all before they can book a demo. And I want for marketing's fruit to be marketing and BDR fruit to be BDR. So I could really attribute not only like the credit, but also the comp. So I think both are very, very important to a BDR at that stage of the game of like, you know, on outbound. And I've talked to a multitude of teams where I say like, hey, you know, a VP of sales from whatever, you know, Uber comes through the inbound line. How do you feel about booking that demo? And they're like, you know, it's good. And I'm like, what about if you did it on outbound? They're like, it's great. Because they knew that they influenced that lead. And so if you round robin your leads here, you're going to basically attributing marketing fruit and the symptoms of a great marketing department to a BDR because they cannot control quality. Let's go into BANT. Asking BANT questions. Here's a list of what it causes to your prospects. Makes your prospect feel like you're too intrusive. That you're asking a bunch of, it's basically like walking into a dinner, introducing yourself and saying like, hey, how much do you make per hour? And, you know, like, who did you vote for in the last election? And what are your thoughts about these different religions? So it's, you know, right off the bat, you know, we want to make our prospects feel valued and we want to make them feel safe, you know, and like they can trust us. And so a good way to eradicate that is by asking them a bunch of different questions that like we need to know the information down the line. But we don't want to, there are other ways to tease out this information other than just bluntly asking them, do you have budget? That's the first problem. Second problem is they're going to give you subjective answers. You know, you ask someone, do you have budget? I kind of almost attribute asking if someone has budget to asking someone, a little kid after dinner if they're hungry. They say no. You say, I have ice cream. They say, I'll make room. So
I love that. That's a good one. I don't think I've heard you say that. That's a good one.
So, yeah, when we ask our prospects, like, do you have budget? They're like, well, for what? You know, if it's something that I highly value, then yeah, I'll find somewhere to make budget. So yeah, so I've noticed like in struggling economies, they'll say people will always make room for alcohol money or to go drink at a bar. And so it's like, whatever matters to us, you're not going to get the objective answer that you want of what their bottom line marketing or what their sales budget is for the year. And if you do, I would question whether that person, you know, really knows the rules of the game because they don't want to open up their billfold, you know, right off the bat. They won't answer honestly. And the last problem that I have with asking BANT questions to your prospects is they're not of any value to your prospects. Right off the jump, we should be aiming to add value to our prospect at any single interaction down the funnel. So if I'm asking them a bunch of qualifying questions, or I'm asking them a bunch of situational questions, or I'm asking them a bunch of, one-off questions, how big is your team? What's your tech stack? What's your hierarchy? Who do you answer to? What's your budget? The main problem that I have with all of those questions is it adds no value to your prospect. And is that the first flavor that you want to communicate to them, is that you basically are going to do things that won't add any value to them. Preventing leads from going to your AE. Again, people do this because they think, okay, I want to protect my AE's calendar and I want to make sure we're specializing here. We're making the best use of your time. This is the list of what you cause to these unqualified leads. I want everyone to take off for a second, and the rest of the webinar, I would ask, take off your sales hat and put on your buyer hat. And think about your buyer journey whenever you're buying different pieces of software. So if you were to inbound and I were to request a demo, and all this marketing effort goes into me coming to the website, and we want to hear from you, we want you to request a demo. I request a demo, 5 minutes later, maybe 10 minutes later, 30 minutes later, I get an email from an SDR asking me to jump on the phone later that week. I, say, okay, Friday's fine. Friday I jump on the call. They ask me a bunch of qualifying questions. How big is your team? What's your tech stack? Do you have any budget? Are you the decision maker? I say, I am the decision maker. Yeah, of course I have budget. Every buyer does, and my team is 5 people. And they say, okay, great. And then they ghost you because you weren't big enough. What is your feeling at that point about that brand? That you feel invalidated, you feel like you don't have enough money, you feel like you aren't the right person, you feel like, you weren't cool enough to purchase their software. And so here's a litany of reasons, or a litany of what it causes to your prospect. Number one, it makes them feel invalidated. If they basically don't get a demo, even though they requested one and they want to know more of your product. Number two, hypergrowth companies. If you sell into SaaS, you sell into, tech companies, it feels like hypergrowth is a buzzword at this point. So many people are expanding so quickly. Let's put the current existing economy aside and situation aside. Typically these tech companies, they go from 5 to 10 to, 20 to 50 to 100 overnight. And if you are asking these qualifying questions and then you are not talking to them, and then they triple or quadruple in size overnight and they want to buy software, the first and only taste that they have in their mouth is that you thought that they weren't good enough to buy your software. So it damages the likelihood that when they are big enough, that they would circle back around to you and want to buy from your team. So one of the things that, and everyone knows this, I'm a big sales engagement fan in general, but I love outreach. And one of the reasons I love outreach is, in the beginning, I said, hey, I've got a couple ideas on how I can scale personalized messaging. And I came into the inbound line and I told the rep, I'm going to give them a shout out. It's Theron Glenny. And I said, hey, I need 1 seat, but I have a bunch of ideas and I need a badass CSM team. So I basically need high effort and high attention, and I'm going to buy only 1 seat. And he said, there is no minimum package for, there's no minimum amount of reps that you have to buy outreach. And I thought that was the most attractive thing as a vendor to say of hey, even if this causes a little bit of internal churn, even if this causes a couple of customers, they're not big enough and then they go out of existence. Now, that is one of the reasons that I really love outreach as a brand, is because when I was a little fish, they treated me really well. So then I go on to different organizations and I bring them in with me because I'm like, hey, this is a great how you can always tell someone's character by how they treat a penny that they don't have to treat well. So it's like when they're these hyper growth companies, it's like they're going to be someone someday. So you want to make sure that you, give them a really great buyer experience. So damages your brand. And then it promises.
And don't do it for that reason. Just jumping in. Don't do it because it should be the end, not a means to something. Everything you should just do it because it's the right thing to do. Not that you might get a benefit in the future.
The last thing too with preventing leads from going to AEs, and we'll get into a system that will accommodate for all of this in a second. But if you are begging people to request a demo and then they request a demo and you don't give them a demo, you essentially broke their trust because you promised something that you didn't deliver. So these people want to see your product. So we need to find a way, and again, we'll get into the system in a second, but we need to find a way to deliver them at no cost to our org, or very limited cost. Like, I don't want to use the AE's time to do it, but we need to find some way to deliver them some level of demo to these people who are unqualified, so we don't, make them feel invalidated. And then the last thing, and then we'll go into this system, but basically the myth with if you reach out quickly, even if I reach out under 5 minutes, I'm still going to have to ask them some awful qualifying questions. Second point, we live in a now society. We don't live in a 5-minute society. So even if you're waiting 5 minutes to do some level of outreach, like, we live in a day and age where I walk into the Hilton, let's say, and I'm like, oh, I need to log into Wi-Fi. And they're like, it's down. And I'm like, it's anarchy. Like, who doesn't have Wi-Fi that's up and running? I remember I was in a WeWork once and the Wi-Fi was down for 30 minutes and everyone was like cashing in on their SLAs and saying like, hey, how could you not have Wi-Fi, at this WeWork, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, we live in a now society, or if we don't have something at our fingertips, then we're pissed right off the bat. And so we want to make sure that we can put in a system where people can, get through that demo request process, not in 5 minutes, not in a week, not in 2 weeks and go through a qualifying process, but in a now scenario where they can book a time with the appropriate person. The last thing, and then I'll go into this system, is Forrester did a research report on all the things that people consider before they buy a software. The top 3 were peer-to-peer. So they call their peers and say, hey, what do you think about this software? Number 2, they follow industry experts. So they go to thought leaders and ask them what they think. And then the third thing is they read third-party reviews. You go 14, 15 variables down, and the last variable that people consider is getting a demo from a vendor. So what that tells you is that when someone inbounds, and Scott, I remember you saying this in one webinar, by the time that they inbound, they know you at this point. Mm-hmm. They have done their research more than ever before in their pajama pants or yoga pants at home. They've figured out who you are, who your competitors are. And the one thing they're really looking for is like pricing, integration, and how do I get off the floor? And so, when you are getting demo requests, you're typically getting someone who knows what they want and are ready to buy. And so we need to instill a process that delivers that demo to them as quickly as possible. So let's get into the structure of a demo request process. So the first thing that you want to do on your website is you want to basically just put a simple piece that says request a demo, and they just have to put in their company email. That's it. And they hit request a demo. At that point, you want to gate their email. So regardless of what they do from there on out, you know that they have interest in requesting a demo. So that's step 1. If they give you a Gmail address, then I would give some kind of kickback error and say, oops, looks like you gave us your personal address. We require a company address, for you to request a demo. So a lot of people, they DQ Gmail addresses, they DQ Hotmail addresses because they say these aren't high quality leads. And my argument back to that is, well, Mark Benioff has a personal email address. So hypothetically, if Mark Benioff used his Gmail address and tried to request a demo of outreach, you would say that person is unqualified based on them giving their personal email. So I usually give a kickback of, at minimum, you need to give me your company email, to request a demo. So you can prompt them at that point if they give you a personal one. Once they do that, step 3 on the left side over here, you want to expand. Once they request that demo, you want to expand to a longer form that basically asks a myriad of different things. And this is all about how you word it. So you can do some fun things like saying, so you don't have to talk to an annoying SDR, would you please answer the following questions? Or so you don't have to go through a brutal qualifying process, would you mind answering the following questions? And I would ask them, I would try and limit these as much as you can, but step 2 here is you want to ask them 3 or 4, like the minimum qualifying criterion that your company would define as, this is a qualified lead. The interesting thing, if you go to most companies and you say, what's a qualified lead to an AE, they'll give you a bunch of subjective reasons, but I would challenge people to find firmographic or technographic or demographic qualifying criterion. Like for instance, over here at Chorus, we want them to have a manager title or above. We want them to have some kind of sales engagement platform or web conferencing software. We want to make sure that they aren't selling field sales, that they're selling remotely to some degree, and that they're selling in English. Like those are the 4 things that I need to know, before we can actually sell into them. So I would implore people to ask these questions with some kind of fun language of like, so you don't have to talk to an annoying SDR. Would you mind answering the following questions?
And Becc, is this a follow-up email or is this another type form they're redirected to after?
So basically they put in their email, and when they hit request a demo, it just downfills to a form.
Got it.
It expands to a form, and it says, looks like, and I usually give, using Clearbit for data enrichment, I give my best guess as to what they are. So I'll say, hey, Scott, looks like you're the head of partnerships for, Sales Hacker and Outreach. You guys have 1,000 employees in your technographic, and you use Outreach for sales engagement and Zoom for web conferencing. Did I get that right? Nice. So you want to use some kind of data enrichment platform to give your best shot on goal as to what their actual role is, what their actual title is, whatever is important to you. So there's a myriad of different providers that you can do this with. DataFox, Clearbit, it does it for enrichment, but you basically want to give your best shot on goal as to what these actual fields are for them, so that at this point they'll say, yes, this is correct. Or they'll say, no, I'm actually, we're not 1,000 employees, we're 500 employees, or, I'm a VP of marketing, I'm not a director of marketing, or I'm a head of sales development, not a VP of sales development, or whatever. But you basically want to in this extended form. So they put in their email, they hit request a demo, you gate their email in case they don't fill out that form. You still want them to have their email in case they don't fill out that form, but you extend to a longer form, and it basically asks them the qualifying questions with filled in using Clearbit, your best shot on goal as to what the the criteria were. So looks like you're the head of partnerships for Sales Hacker. You're 1,000 people because you're required by Outreach, and then you're using Outreach and Zoom for web conferencing. Did I get that right?
Nice. Quick other question, and I know we got a lot to go. Alex Donnelly wants to know, and I don't know if we'll get to this, would be curious to understand how lead grading or scoring would get factored into this process. Are there any resources you'd recommend to check out? Are we going to get to any lead scoring grading?
Lead scoring, it's a different topic for a different time. But yeah, I don't use lead scoring in the traditional sense of typically companies categorize lead scoring in terms of the amount of actions that they've taken with your content, and they base it on the level of company, but they don't base it on the title. So I bifurcate every single action out, and I say, if you're requesting a demo here, let's talk about that, and I don't worry about the concept of MQL. But great question. To hear more about it, I'm actually doing a Sales Hacker webinar on April 16th, and we're going to go into all that process. So if you don't mind tuning in for that, and we'll go deeper. So far, they put their email into the demo request button, they hit request a demo, it expands to a longer form, and it gives your best, using Clearbit data enrichment or DataFox, gives your best shot on goal for what you think the answers are for their qualifying criterion. And you say, did I get that right? And they hit confirm, or they update you and then they hit confirm. As an asterisk mark, I always have the safe button of, if you want them to have the option to just circumvent and talk to an SDR, then I put talk to an annoying SDR link on the bottom, and they can click there and they can go straight to an SDR's calendar if they want to talk to someone who's an actual person and they don't want to use the line. Because the goal here is you want to qualify as quickly as possible. VP of sales from Oracle requests a demo from Chorus. I want to have a computer ask him a couple questions and then get him on his way. So at that point, they filled in this longer form. Some people haven't filled in the form at all, but they've gated their email. And you've got two buckets within the people that have filled out the form. You've got people who are qualified and people who aren't qualified. So let's start with qualified. If they are qualified, then you can use Chili Piper as a calendaring solution. They're a great calendaring solution, and you can just route them to the AE who owns the account. So if I'm the VP of sales at Oracle, I fill in this form, I hit confirm, and then it leads me to the calendar of the appropriate AE. And I can sit there, I can circumvent and talking to an SDR, circumvent any brutal qualifying session, and I just go straight to the calendar of the AE and I schedule a time with the AE. I allow them at that time to put in any kind of notes of things they want to cover in the session. Like, you know, you already have my firmographic qualifying information. I like to cover pricing. I'd like to cover, you know, whatever. You have this new functionality called Cold Call Central. You know, I'd like to talk about that. But I basically enable the prospect to put any kind of notes of things that they want to cover in the meeting. But I have them put calendar right on the spot so that you can triple, quadruple conversion here, because these people, you know, can live schedule a time with an AE without having to talk to anyone in between.
Cool.
How to keep it all even is there's a way in Chili Piper to where, I mean, a lot of people are probably going to be asking if they own a sales team. Well, wouldn't I as a sales rep want to just own 3,000 accounts at the likelihood that someone would inbound and then it would go straight to my calendar? So basically how I have it set up in Chili Piper is that it defines the types of appointments that you get, but not the volume. So let's say that Scott owns, you know, Marketo, and Scott owns Drift, and Drift and Marketo both inbound. They're both scheduled on Scott, you know, Scott's calendar. So the next two rounds, it would skip Scott. So it'd say, okay, I'm going to go to, you know, whoever, Terry, John, Alex, Colin, and Dan. And then I'm going to skip Scott again. And I'm going to go to Terry, John, you know, Alex, Scott, Alex, and Dan again. And then the third round, I'm going to come back to Scott. But basically, there's a way within the calendaring solution to make sure, you know, that it would define that Scott got Marketo and Drift, but it would not bump up his volume of the amount of demos that he got if he had more accounts in his name. Because we want to make sure that the AEs have accounts in their name because they want to work them, not because it increases their amount of demos that they'll receive on the inbound line.
Got it.
If they aren't qualified, this is where it gets fun. So if they are qualified, then they basically just route straight through a calendaring solution and schedule a time with that AE. Quick, easy, painless. They don't have to talk to an SDR. They set it up right then. So it's faster than 5 minutes because they did it on the spot. If they aren't qualified, then I basically have them, you know, let's say they fill in that criterion and they are whatever, they're a field sales team. It routes straight to an SDR calendar as opposed to an AE, where the SDR on the line spends 15 minutes with them and makes sure that they are not qualified. There's going to be some crossover in that line, meaning there's some people that on paper are going to appear like they aren't qualified, but when you start talking to them, they actually are. And I'll give you an example of that. In the second section, I give you an example of that.
Sorry, just to confirm, because this is against a lot of best practices right now in the industry. So you're saying if I'm unqualified, I come inbound, but I meet the technographics. Does it still have to meet the technographics, or this is anyone who's unqualified?
Anyone who's unqualified. Then they would route straight to an SDR calendar and they would set up 15 minutes of time with the SDR. You wouldn't tell them this, but they're going to an SDR and they're spending 15 minutes on the line with them.
Got it.
In that conversation, the SDR is basically just double confirming that they are not truly qualified. And I'll give you an example of someone who was qualified, who appeared on paper that they weren't. Someone from the New York Post inbounded. And they said, hey, I have a team of 2 right now, but I'm going to be at a team of 30 by the end of this month. On paper, they're a team of 2. Mm-hmm. But by the end of the month, they're going to be a team of 30. So that person we do want to talk to. So in that case, that the SDR finds out that they actually are qualified, they would manually put this person on the AE's calendar. If they aren't in fact qualified, which is going to be the majority of the time. They ask them a couple questions and they say like, hey, talk me through your setup here, typical SDR call. And they find out they truly aren't qualified. They're like, I have a 1-person team or 2-person team, etc. Then they give them the next step of a bi-weekly product webinar. So every other week here at Chorus, we are running a bi-weekly product webinar that is for all of the unqualifieds. The lead, regardless of qualifying criterion, gets the demo. They see what our product looks like. They get to know us as a brand. So they're not mad because they couldn't get a demo. But we're not spending all of our expensive AE time on spending time with those leads that are one-off. So basically, if they are qualified in that pool, then we manually put them on the AE calendar. If they aren't qualified, which will be the most likely scenario, we send them to a bi-weekly product webinar as the next step. And we say like, hey, excited for you to take a deep dive in our platform. In this session, we're going to cover X, Y, and Z. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat or along the way. Excited for you to take a look.
Cool.
So now let's go a little bit more into what that bi-weekly product webinar looks like. The bi-weekly product webinar is basically the who of who runs it. Is I have a senior SDR who knows our product and is aspiring to be an AE and has been demo certified by sales leaders. So, an SDR, like one of the things that they want to do typically is they want to become an account executive. They're very, very different roles. And we want to get them demo certified, number one, that's what companies typically do, but we want them to practice, on some actual live prospects because it's a completely different game in a mock scenario than it is live. So I have a senior SDR practice on a bunch of quote unquote unqualified leads. So they run this bi-weekly product webinar, and basically the what it is it's a basic demo. I have the SDR go into the pool beforehand and say, okay, I have 30 people that are going to be on this line. Out of these 30 people, what's the most common buyer persona? Let's say it's a sales leader. And I'm like, great, I'm going to give this demo as if it was to a sales leader without discovery. I'm just going to go through a blanket demo of what our product does. And I'm going to give them all the functionality in terms of a sales leader because that's my heaviest buyer persona when it comes to who's on this webinar. So they're giving just a basic demo in this bi-weekly product webinar. All of the unqualified leads are happy because they got a demo and you didn't have to waste the AE's time to do it.
Nice.
At the end of that webinar, you're going to think this is nerdy. At the end of that webinar, we have the senior SDR say, hey, if anyone's interested in pricing, then you can feel free to reach out to me. This is my email address and I'd be happy to talk to you further, because there's even going to be some in that unqualified pool who, even though they didn't hit the right criterion, they still just want to buy your product. So for instance, we have really a 3-seat minimum over here at Chorus, but it's like, but really we don't have a 3-seat minimum. We have a pricing minimum. And some people, they just want to spend the money to have that 1 seat because they want it for their organization. So I have the SDR at the end of the demo that they give, this aspiring SDR give a blanket demo to all these unqualifieds. And at the end they say, anyone who's interested in pricing, I'd be more than happy to talk with you about it. Here's my email. And I train that SDR on how to manage those contracts and get them in the AE mindset and thinking process, because they're handling now live contracts with live prospects at no cost to the org, not using the AE time. And by the way, it's training my senior SDR that whenever they go become an account executive, it's a very small gap because now they're just talking about bigger deals, not learning how to be an account executive in general. So they get used to demoing the product and getting to do that process. And the great downside is, again, you have a lot of people who are unqualified who are reaching out to you for a demo, and you need to give them something. So I've seen companies in the past, they'll send over some kind of video of what the product is, best case scenario. But my advice would be send them into this webinar, have an SDR who's probably thrilled to practice their demo pitch on these unqualified so that they get a demo, they love your brand, they think you're great, and you will surface a couple of deals. On average, we surface about 2 to 3 deals per webinar out of this. Okay, so let's talk about the responsibilities of the inbound rep. And then I think today we should just do inbound KPI system.
Okay.
Maybe
All right, we'll get there. And we will probably go a little bit over in true Becc fashion. So if you do have to jump, it is completely understandable. Of course, it's recorded, so you can check it out on YouTube, and we'll send it out in 24 hours. But I do want to get to the full solution and the KPI system.
Yeah, so we'll do inbound KPI. We'll do the responsibilities of the inbound SDR, and then the KPI system, and then we'll close.
Cool.
So the responsibilities of the inbound SDR, they're responsible for 4 different things over here at Chorus. Number 1, they're responsible for if someone gates their email and does not fill out the extended form. That is someone who still wants a demo, but they didn't go through our tirade of basically qualifying themselves. And so those are still like normal demo requests. So I have them run a sequence with an automatic email where they run a normal sequence of what a normal org does for a typical inbound demo request. So, they do an automatic email with some qualifying questions, they do several calls, but basically the first responsibility is the SDR needs to run what a typical org does for inbound demo requests just for the pool that gated their email and did not fill out the longer form. So we always want to give our prospects the option to speed up this qualifying process, but we don't want to put the weight on them to qualify themselves. So if they don't want to qualify themselves, they don't fill out our longer form. Well, the great thing is, we have their email, and so we can just start running the normal sequence of what people do, what normal inbound reps do on these inbound demo requests. So that's step 1 for the responsibilities. Step 2 is, remember, some people are going to look unqualified on paper, and we want to find out if they're 100% qualified. So they scheduled 15-minute blocks on our calendar. So the second responsibility of the inbound SDR is that they take these 15 minutes appointments that were scheduled on their calendar, and they figure out if these people were truly unqualified. If they were qualified, they manually give them to an AE. If they're unqualified, they send them the biweekly product webinar as a next step. The third thing is they run the biweekly product webinar. That's their responsibility. And then the fourth responsibility is they assemble contracts for prospects who request pricing after the biweekly product webinar. There's an acronym, BWP, cool. Biweekly product webinar. So those are the 4 responsibilities for your inbound sales rep. So they're going to run the sequence on people who gated their email but didn't fill out your form. They're going to take the 15-minute qual calls with unqualified leads to make sure they're truly, unqualified. They're going to run the biweekly product webinar for the people who are unqualified, and they're going to assemble contracts, pricing contracts for anyone who wanted pricing after the biweekly product webinar, even though it appeared that they weren't truly qualified.
I love it. I feel like your inbound team must feel so much more empowered too, doing these activities versus just simply, feeling like they're just almost like customer service. This is so much more, I feel like, empowering.
They love it. So I want, there is a team that I did this with, and I won't mention their name, but if you go to the Chili Piper website, we drove conversion from 20% to 90% on the inbound line overnight when I instilled this process. So, wow. I mean, number 1, it's like, okay, we just get these people to get into demos. So it's like my conversion skyrockets, but industry average is around 22%, for they request a demo, 22% of the people, industry average. So to your comment about best practice, what best practice has given us is that on average, 22% of the people who want to see our product actually see our product. Mm-hmm. So some of the time it's because they're unqualified, but I do not buy that 78% of them weren't qualified. So, something's broken here. And so this is the first shot that I had to fix it. So it's like, number 1, it helps with conversion. But like you mentioned, number 2, my inbound reps over here are they feel like they're real AEs. Mm-hmm. They're holding these webinars, they're holding these contracts and pricing, they're, really becoming engaged with our prospects. So they're much less of a, order taker. But they really feel like, they're part of the team and that they're really part of that front line as an AE. So let's close with comping reps to drive the inbound system. I do have outbound and allbound. Maybe we just do that on another webinar, but let's just do inbound today, and then we'll take some questions and close up.
Yeah.
KPI systems is the most important thing in sales development. period, in my opinion. So before I did personalization at scale, before I talked about any kind of technique, before I talked about any kind of objection handling, before I talked about any kind of, this is how you open, this is how you get someone engaged, this is how you ask the right questions. If you aren't measuring your reps in a way that promotes them and encourages them to book the right people, then because of the, like you said, is everything fair, because of your KPI system and because how you're comping them, you're going to eradicate all of the wonderful things that you're training them to want to book. So before I even scaled any kind of personalized messaging, people are like, oh, well, you 4X, 3X, and 6X. I'm like, correct. But the first thing that I did was rip out the existing KPI infrastructure, because the number one thing you can do to help motivate your reps, you know, to go in the right direction is comp them to do the right behavior of, like, you need to define what quality is, you need to define what they can control, and then you need to measure them accordingly, because otherwise you have someone who's going to President's Club for SDR who is just someone who got a bunch of badass round robin leads, and everyone on your team hates that person. Knows it, hates that person, and hates you as a leader because you just put in that KPI system. So, you know, some of the people, like, the backlash is like, oh, well, you know, I want a very simple KPI system. And I'm like, people, let me help you out. Inbound SDRs, outbound SDRs, all-bound SDRs, when they go to the bar, typically pre-COVID or post-COVID, hopefully, they go to the bar on Friday afternoon, they're not talking about how they can't understand their KPI system. They're talking about two things. Their KPI system is broken, and this, you know, guy or girl who isn't that talented looks like they're number one because they got a whole bunch of round robins, number one. And number two, they're talking about territories and how territories aren't even. So those are the two biggest gripes. So I would argue that KPI systems are the most important thing, and appropriately gearing your team is not the messaging strategy. Even though I love personalization and I love messaging, KPI systems are the most important. So let's do inbound, and then we'll take some questions, and maybe, you know, I'll do a separate session later on outbound and all bound. I don't want to keep everyone on the line.
We'll always take you back.
For 8 hours. An inbound KPI system. These are the things that an inbound rep can and cannot control. Can control. They can control how quickly they reach out to someone. They can control on if they get someone into a meeting, and they can control on leading unqualified reps into an alternative path. What they cannot control and what they cannot take credit for is, number one, I'm going to break all marketers' hearts here. Maybe I won't. They cannot control the volume of demo requests. They are not a marketing agent. They do not impact how many people request a demo that day. Number two, they cannot control who requests a demo. That's more marketing's job. You know, I would argue even marketing can't really control who requests a demo. They can in terms of the content they write, but it's hard to. So they cannot control the role of the person who requests a demo. They cannot control the size of the company of the person who requests a demo. And they cannot control any of the qualifying criteria. Like, do they have the right technographic setup? Are they selling in English? Are they a field sales team versus remote? So the interesting thing about inbound reps is most people are comping them on the volume of meetings that they set and the quality of those meetings, when those are two variables that the inbound rep simply has no influence over. So if a senior vice president over at Oracle, or again, an intern from a company that, you know, just started and it's like a 3-person company, both request a demo, I had no impact over that. I'm just the person who's, you know, looking through the fish that have jumped in my boat and trying to understand, are these people qualified or not? So against, you know, all best practice, I would say the number one thing you cannot comp your inbound reps on are how many demo requests that are happening that actually make it into meetings, and the quality of those demo requests. So I can't remember his name, but someone mentioned, like, how do you comp them then? How do you comp them in terms of how do you make sure that they don't want to push over unqualified? So you want to define a system where you make it completely okay for your inbound rep to say that this was unqualified and that they don't fiscally get damaged by it. So the number one thing that I would encourage people to comp on is a percentage of conversion for qualified. And what I mean by that is, let's say that 10 people request a demo, 3 of them were unqualified. Great, they're unqualified. I put them into my CRM and I give them the reasoning as to why. Out of those 7 that hit the firmographic criterion, what percentage did I get into a meeting? So then I'm not having a game of like, if demo requests shoot up to 200 for the month, I look like I'm awesome. If demo requests during a time like this, not to be very, COVID centric, but during a time like this, they shoot down, then I look like I'm not doing my job. You want to base them off of a percentage gain. So, let's say that 10 people, request a demo. So I put an example down here on the left, their variable is 1K per month to make it easy. 7 out of, let's say that 20 demos came in, 10 of them were unqualified, and they said they put them into the CRM and logged the reasoning as to why. You have 10 left. Let's say they got 7 out of those 10 that were qualified into a meeting, then they would get $700 of their variable comp because that was the percentage of conversion. So then again, if you get 3,000 demo requests or you get 3, the rep doesn't look awesome and the rep doesn't look terrible in either case scenario, because really they are just responsible for disqualifying someone if they're disqualified, and they shouldn't get hurt for that. And they also shouldn't get encouraged when there is a surplus of demo requests that come in terms of quality.
I like it. Quick question, because I think there was some confusion in what you said, because there's a few questions that came in that is basically around, you weren't suggesting that the unqualified ones go to an AE, right? That's not what you're suggesting. The unqualified ones are going to this product demo that the SDR is running, this product webinar.
Correct. The unqualified ones go to a product webinar that is run by...
so they still get a demo, quote unquote, but it's a webinar. So multiple people, because there's a lot of people saying like, how did your VP of sales say about this? Taking leads that didn't go through an SDR. So that's just one. So for clarity's sake, sorry, this material is really, really dense. I'm trying to do my best here to explain it, but yes, you would never send an unqualified demo to an AE. So you basically, but you still want that unqualified person to have some kind of demo. So you send them to a biweekly product webinar and have a senior SDR run it. So the myth is not that we should be sending these to AEs. The myth is that we shouldn't be doing anything with them, because it damages your brand and it makes these people not ever want to buy from you if they try to request a demo and they feel not cool enough that they didn't get one. So we want to deliver some kind of demo. So I send them all to a biweekly product webinar and have a senior SDR run them. Got it. Cool.
So the inbound SDRs are based on CompWise, the percent of conversion. Again, the percent of conversion for the people who are objectively qualified that made it into a meeting. The second thing that you can qualify or you can comp them on, if you would like to, is speed to lead. So I've done it in the past where basically if they're, maybe 50% of their variable is based off the percent of conversion for qualified, and then 50% is based off of speed to lead. If, under 10 minutes, 100%, 10 to 30 minutes, it's 75%, 30 minutes to an hour, it's 50%, an hour to 2 hours, it's 25%, and 2 hours, plus is 0% of that piece of KPI. But this is just an asterisk mark because you should, if you're sending an automatic email in that first step of your sequence to your prospects, then you wouldn't need this. But for all the people who are sending a manual email, and having their SDRs reach out, if you want to get someone to do something more effectively, pay them to do it. So associate their variable, associate their wallet to that piece. So I've had reps, I've done this in the past where I did 50% of their KPI was on conversion, percent conversion, and then 50% of their KPI system was on speed to lead. And I've had them, someone requests a demo and literally they were mid-sentence in a sentence with me and they walked off and took the call because, they were paid to do it. So as an asterisk mark, if you do have a manual step for the first step of your inbound sequence, and you don't have any of that process set up like I talked about, then you can measure them on speed to lead if you really want to drive them to have that behavior. As a bonus to inbound reps, as a spiff, I will often give them a percentage of the contract if it closes for the biweekly product webinar. So again, to whoever asked about sending over unqualified leads to an AE, we do not send them to an AE. Just for double clarity, we send them to a biweekly product webinar. We have a senior SDR run it. And then at the end of that webinar, we have the senior SDR say, anyone who wants pricing, feel free to contact me. Here's my email. You'll get a couple of leads that will come in and say like, hey, even though I don't have the right team size, I still want to buy your product. And I have the senior SDR train them to manage the contract, close the actual deal. And as a bonus to them, as a spiff, I will give them a percentage, a smaller percentage than a normal AE would get, because they're in training ground, but some kind of bonus that they just closed a deal, out of that unqualified pool.
Love it.
I think that's a good place to stop. We covered a lot. Why don't we, it looks like there's a bunch of questions in the chat. Thanks everyone so much for coming. Why don't we handle like 5 minutes of questions?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I know this went over. Appreciate. There's still a ton of you on here. We had a ton of people join us, so thank you so much. All right, I'm just going to rapid fire these. I'll put some thoughts if I have them. Okay. Sander asks, do you use Clearbit to enrich data? Yes.
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 Done.
Boom.
I use Clearbit to back enrich the data on the form, the expanded form. Once they request a demo, I use Clearbit to flex in my best educated guess as to their role, technographic setup, and their company size and name.
Perfect. Okay, so this one I think will be more of a clarifying question, but Zach, thanks for the question. How do you suggest handling the randomness, luck of the draw, outlier situations, i.e. a demo request comes in, gets round robin to an SDR, then 10 minutes later, a different person from the same company gets round robin to a different SDR. Who handles? What happens if an inbound gets assigned to an SDR and we know it's a junk lead off the bat? Do we change the round robin in real time to make that SDR whole again or get them the next inbound? Or do you establish you get what you get and don't get upset culture?
You don't round robin.
Yeah.
At all.
I think there's no round robin. We're not round robin. Can you clarify what we're doing instead again?
Yeah, there's no round robin at all. So basically, instead, people are coming to the website, they're qualifying themselves, and they're routing straight to an AE. And then the inbound reps, again, are not measured on the volume from like how they're paid out. They're not measured from the volume of people they get into a meeting. It's at a percentage. So it doesn't matter to them if they get 10 or if they get 20 or if they get 30 that are, out of 30 leads they get that 7 are junk and 23 are great, or they get 7 that are great and 23 are junk. It doesn't matter to them because they get paid on a percentage game of out of the people who were objectively qualified, how many do they get into a meeting? And that's only from the form if the person gates their email and doesn't fill out the existing form and qualifies himself and goes straight to an AE. So you'll see your volume that they're even having to handle kick way down.
Yeah, love it.
So no round robining.
No round robining. So here's 2 things: no round robining, and we're not sending them straight to an AE. Because here's another one that's similar. How do you manage people that complete a form but they get the wrong idea of the product and so they have a need you don't cover? How do you avoid sending them straight to the AE? It's the product webinar. Yeah,
so if they're unqualified from a technographic, firmographic, or demographic in terms of role setup, if they're qualified, they go to an AE. I think this person is asking, like, what if they had some, like, I'll give you an example, and I hope this person's still on the line, but, I was in mobile attribution. We did tracking of, like, when someone clicks on an ad and they end up in an app, which ad did they click on? Some people would get confused on the inbound line and thought we did mobile tracking as in we tracked their phone. So I'd get a bunch of wives that would call in and say, like, hey, my husband, I think that he's in a different part of the city. Can you track down where he is? And I'm like, first of all, I think you got some problems. Second of all, we don't do that, and so, I mean, there's always going to be one-off cases. Like, there is no, comprehensive bullet. So you are going to get a couple of those, but I would argue to an AE, if it's a VP of sales from Oracle, I don't care what they want to talk about. I want the relationship. Like, this is a person who I want to talk to, period. Like, I've jumped on calls before where I'm like, I don't know what this person wants. And like, you could argue that it will mess with your sales cycle and your numbers. But, if I'm a good AE, then I want to network with those people and I want to understand what they want. So even if in the one-off, and I think that's what it will be like 1% of the time that they just think your product does something completely different than it does. But even in that case scenario, I would almost, I would still want the connection of like, oh, I get to meet the SVP of sales from, Intel or whoever, and I just want to, meet that person, treat them well, have integrity in the conversation so that long term, you don't know what you're going to use them for, but sales is a long-term game,
Totally.
Period, especially in tech.
Totally. Here's another one, Bobby. What would be a good way to convince management to adopt a calendaring system and prevent the round robining? How did you pitch that initially?
I'm not the poster child of how you should pitch things internally. I would actually.
We're doing this, or you can fire me. That's the Becc Holland.
Yeah, that's Becc Holland. The Becc Holland method is like, hey, let me have autonomy, and if I don't 3x your results. So I did that in two fronts in my past organizations. I'm like, let me have autonomy. That's what you hired me for, right? Is to be an effective leader. Don't ask me any questions. And if I can 2x, 3x your results in a month, if I can't do that, you can let me go. So I'm very, neck in the guillotine. I'm not suggesting that to everyone, but a great way to do this, honestly, one of the main drivers for me to publish content like this is because I want for the voiceless to have a voice. So a great way to do that, I always suggest people is like send them to my webinars, and I'm always game to take any kind of call with these leaders possible because, at the end of the day, leadership is not the bad guy. They want the best things for your org, and they're looking at these best practice models and they say like, oh, and I'll give you an example. I did personalization at scale, and it's like, well, a best practice is to not personalize. And I'm like, well, I just 4x my results by doing it. So I get best practice isn't, it isn't saying this, but 76% of SDRs aren't hitting quota, and the average conversion on an inbound line is 22%. So I'd argue that best practice, it's kind of best house, on a pretty bad block right now. And so, I don't really know how to answer that question other than, how I did it is just like, hey, give me an opportunity to prove something out. If it doesn't work, fine, we'll switch back, but give me a month to do this and then influx this in. And then, really you need to put your money where your mouth is to see if like your ideas actually pan out and pan out quickly. But another alternative is you can send them to webinars like this. And I'd be more than happy to jump on the phone with anyone, honestly, and unpack the process.
Love it. Awesome. We'll try and sneak two more in.
Okay.
This is a qualifying question from Graham. Graham, you've had some great questions so far. He's just talking about the speed to lead KPI system.
Yes.
And just calling out the fact the speed to lead can be impacted by the SDR having a pre-booked 15-minute meeting. How do you get around that?
Correct. So the speed to lead component would only be if you don't have that qualifying system put into place. So that's why I put 2 asterisk marks of here of like, if you're not going to listen to anything that I said on the front end, if you're just going to, do what you are doing based on running a sequence, then speed to lead, you would need to measure it. So I've done in the past before I got to deploy a system like this, then I incorporated this piece of speed to lead because I didn't have that robust setup. So if you're going to use that system above, you don't need speed to lead at all, and you can pull it. And I also put 2 asterisk marks for the bonus, because if you're not running my process. If you're not running my process, then I would say like speed to lead and percent of conversion. If you are running my process, then you don't need speed to lead. You would just need percent conversion for the people who are qualified. And that would only be, again, for people who gated their email, didn't fill out the longer form, what was their percent conversion for those people who were objectively qualified.
Yeah, got it. All right, one more, and then I'll let you go. And thank you. We still have a ton of people hanging out with us. It's been awesome. We're about 20 minutes over now. Last one. How would you adapt your SDR approach when the LTV of what you sell is below 6K? So small LTV. Are you still doing those webinars, you think? Anything else you would switch?
Like there's a certain, I wouldn't shift anything. I mean, I'm very, very hesitant to give any kind of answer when I don't know the business model setup, but 6K, if your ACV is, 6K or below, I would say in all cases, like, 6K or below, you're signifying to me that you're more of a B2C model. You're flirting with B2C more. And so I'd say in all case scenarios, like people, if you're pushing them to request a demo, you need to give them some kind of demo in some form, shape, or fashion. Kind of a side note is SDRs, it's a grind. It's a really, really bad grind. And so it's nice for them to be able to break up the day with kind of different activities. So like going to an event is always fun for them, or manning a booth is always really fun for them, or like doing things that, like any kind of film review, or like, pairing along with the AE and like understanding what they're doing, or blitzes or spiffs are always really fun for them. So, in my experience, like, we're talking about 1 hour, let's argue an hour of setup time and then an hour for the actual demo. We're talking of 1 hour of one SDR's time every other week. So I think from a payment perspective, like surely it's worth it. You might surface a couple of deals, which is one great thing. But the second great thing is you don't damage your brand to all of those people who are unqualified, because you want to treat everyone, regardless of their stature, regardless of whether they're an SDR, AE, manager, director, VP, etc. You want to treat them with respect, and you want to have the integrity to do what you promise them. And so I would say it's worth it to me. I would say almost regardless of actual, ACV, because, in my mind, if something has a lower ACV, you're going to have a higher volume. And so you're going to make up for that in the biweekly product webinar. But it's always nice for the SDR to just be able to, go and pitch the product. And if nothing else, then it gives them some practice on how to pitch the product if they want to become an account executive soon.
I love it. I love it. All right. We will wrap up there. Becc Holland, thank you so much.